American Maritime Voices was created to help you speak up, show your pride, and when needed, push back. The future of maritime is in your hands, and its story needs to be told. Will you help tell it?
Welcome back to the American Maritime Podcast, powered by Big Whig Podcasts. I'm your host, Jennifer Carpenter, and today we are very excited to welcome Bill Doyle, CEO of the Dredging Contractors of America, the leading voice of the dredging industry for 3 decades. Bill has served as a merchant marine officer, a U.S. naval officer, an attorney and marine engineer, a presidential appointee, and most recently, before his second tour of duty running DCA, he ran the Port of Baltimore. Bill, there is so much I want to ask you about today, but thank you so much for joining us.
Pleased to be here, Jennifer, and looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the basics. Dredging is so important to the U.S. economy, and most people don't understand it at all. Tell us a little bit. Dredging 101, please.
Yeah, dredging is an enormous asset for the United States of America. The ships that come into port, those ships, the new generation of ships that we have now, probably 10 years ago, they wouldn't fit into most of the East Coast ports. So the ports had to be dredged, and that's the shipping channels and the federal channels. Most of that work is put out by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The contracting, it's a private sector first industry that the government recognizes. So when channels need to be deepened, when they have to be widened, when they have to be maintenance dredged, when your beaches need to be renourished, the Army Corps of Engineers will put that work out to the private sector. It's a very competitive dredging industry with over 25 companies that bid for work. It is what it is. We take the material, we deepen the ports, we deepen the berths so that the ships can come in and commerce can flow, and that's how our economy works.
And we all learned more than we probably ever thought we would need to about the supply chain during the pandemic. Dredging played such a critical role in keeping the supply chain moving.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
Yeah, it certainly did, Jennifer. A big part of what you saw happen was prior to the pandemic, most of the people in the United States didn't realize that 40% of all cargo coming into the United States came in through Los Angeles, Long Beach. Los Angeles and Long Beach became, through the pandemic, was so backed up, you needed to find, or your retailers, your box stores, and your ocean carriers needed to find other outlets in order to get the products into the United States. And that led us through the Panama Canal, which was recently expanded in 2016, to get into the Gulf and East Coast. And if those ports weren't dredged and maintenance dredged, so we kept the maintenance dredging going throughout the whole pandemic, they didn't skip a beat, like most of your Jones Act companies. Everybody in the Jones Act fleet, whether you're dredging, whether you're tankers, whether you're container ships, we worked. And on the dredging side, we kept the ports open and cleared in order to get the cargo in and out. And that's what our companies do, that's what our workers do, and that's the dredging industry.
And it's absolutely vital. Bill, you mentioned the Jones Act. So tell our listeners a little bit about what role the Jones Act plays in providing the foundation for this critical.
Yeah, dredging has been around a long time. A lot of people don't know that the first vestige of the Dredge Act and the Jones Act, the Dredge Act was formed in 1906, 14 years before the Jones Act even came into existence. And it was a shipbuilding component because we were relying on foreign vessels to do our dredging. And then we had a series of hurricanes and weather down on the Gulf Coast. There were no dredges. So the government said, we're going to form the Dredge Act. All dredges that will work in the United States must be built in the United States. Now, since then, the Dredge Act has been rolled into the Jones Act, and it's part and parcel to the actual Jones Act of 1920. So when you look at the American-owned, American-built, American-crewed, that is the Jones Act. And right now we're approaching $3 billion worth of construction going on in shipyards all over the United States for dredge vessels, dredge equipment, scows, barges, hopper dredges, cutter suction dredges, clamshell dredges. That's what's going on right now. It's the largest recapitalization in the history of the dredging.
That is exciting stuff. And so it's the Jones Act that is providing the investment security and the foundation that enables DCA members to make those investments,
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. It is the Jones Act that does that. We consider ourselves, and we are, a strong supporter and part of the Jones Act. These investments that the companies make, they need to be confident in the fact that the Jones Act is not going away in order to make these investments. It's also bodes well for national security. So we don't just do it for economic reasons, but when you look at all of your Navy bases around the country, the dredging is done by these private sector contractors for the Army Corps of Engineers, and we keep the military ships, Navy ships, vessels, Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, all of those vessels move because of the dredging of the private sector fleet. Jones Act fleet.
That is great stuff. Well, and you're retelling the history of the Dredge Act is pretty interesting. I suspect most people don't know that. And it's so relevant because how many times do we hear foreign countries, foreign operators say, oh, why do we actually need an American-built, American-owned, American-operated dredge fleet?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is something that we hear often. And, you really don't understand it until you get into a situation where you need dredging now, okay? And basically what we have is a system of Jones Act dredges that are set up for projects that are planned and then projects on demand. When there is a hurricane comes through the Gulf Coast, our dredges need to get down there and get those rivers cleared. And they will do that. You can't rely on a foreign industry to do that. I think a big point, and which takes us into consideration, is Germany has lost their dredging fleet. They're gone. Europe has lost it. In their shipbuilding side of what you would call a European Jones Act, it doesn't exist anymore.
So what happened to it?
It's gone. Economically, they let it go. All right. And what happens is, and this is the interesting part of it, is that your vessels that Germany used to build and used to use are now being built in China. Okay.
Whoa.
And if you're a dredger, a European dredger, you're building your vessels in China, but you don't have access to the Chinese market. And they're complaining about that, meaning the Europeans are complaining that, well, we don't even get to compete in China. No, you don't. China's rules are China's rules. China's going to dredge for themselves. We don't, in the United States, want to be in a situation where we build our vessels somewhere else, and then we need those vessels to come back into the United States, and a foreign entity has built them. No, it's not there. We build our own. We take care of ourselves. It's a national security issue. It's an economic issue. And our companies, American-made, American-crewed, American-built, American-owned. And that's the only thing we can rely on. We don't want to be in a position like the Europeans.
Wow. That is just an amazing split screen juxtaposition, picturing what we have now and what situation we could be in if we were to be lured into giving up the protection we enjoy with the Jones Act.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've been in these situations before, and one of the most recent example is the microchips. Okay? In the 90s, the United States was producing, well over 70% of all microchips in the world. Well, we went down to somewhere in the range of 20%. All of those microchips were foreign built. Okay? So what had to happen? The United States, Congress, policymakers had to come in, step in, and do the CHIPS Act.
Yep.
So we're going to have to build our own microchips. And that's what happens. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take over a decade to get that up and running. Billions and billions of dollars spent getting the microchip industry back into the United States. We don't want to be there with shipbuilding. We don't want to be there with the Jones Act. We have it now. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And keep it.
Absolutely. Here. So, Bill, you have very varied maritime experience, and you most recently served as director of the Port of Baltimore, where I'm sure you have some perspective on China's ambitions to control port infrastructure worldwide as well as vessels. Can you just talk a little bit about that aspect of the security challenge?
Yeah, I will. It is a security challenge. Again, like the microchips, 40 years ago, your ship-to-shore cranes were all made in the United States. Okay, so the cranes that you see now, the large ship-to-shore cranes that basically will load and unload the largest vessels coming into the United States. So 22,000 TEU vessels on the West Coast. If you take Baltimore, for instance, we can do the 16,000 to 18,000 TEU, the largest ships that can fit through the Panama Canal. Mm-hmm. But again, we gave up the technology, we gave it, and all those cranes are being built in China. All right. Now, China's going to fill a void. If you allow China to fill a void and to make your goods, then you're going to have to rely on China. Yep. We need the Jones Act to stay in place the way that it is because we don't want to rely on a foreign nation, any foreign nation. But when you look at the port infrastructure, a lot of it, I can see the focus of the administration, of Congress, is that, we have to take a look at this. For 40 years, we've been outsourcing. There are some industries like crane making, like microchips, like shipbuilding, that we don't want to lose. And we've got to do this and keep it in place to have our economy and our national security.
Absolutely. They're just part of that critical industrial base we've got to have.
Yeah.
Bill, let's shift gears a little bit to the environmental benefits of dredging. I'm not sure most folks think about the role that the dredging industry plays in environmental protection, coastal restoration. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're doing some cool things.
Yeah. So what a lot of people, they'll ask, all right, so you dredge. What do you do with the mud, the dredge material? Well, the policy in the past was, well, you just take it out to sea and bottom dump, right? You get rid of it at sea. We've come a long way, and the Army Corps of Engineers is in this team as well, that's not wasteful material. We should take that material and find a beneficial use. It's called beneficial use of dredge material. And for instance, if you look at the Chesapeake Bay, so the channel for Baltimore starts in Virginia. It's down in Cape Henry. It comes all the way up to Chesapeake Bay. You've got several islands in the Chesapeake Bay that were almost completely overrun by sea level rise and storms. As recently as the early 90s, they were just specks on a map. Well, what you had is the state and the federal government and the dredging contractors said, why don't we rebuild these islands? We'll take the dredge material from the Chesapeake Bay, and instead of wasting it, we will take that material, rebuild the islands, rebuild the shoreline so that you have bumpers for storms. It's storm protection, it's coastal resilience, and all of that material that you're seeing nationwide, there are uses for it. Now, it took a long time to get there because you had to get the environmentalists to understand that this is safe material. Mm-hmm. It's not polluted material. It's been tested by state agencies, the EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, all of those, you had to get over that hurdle to say it's safe. That's why one of the things that you don't hear people say anymore, not in the dredging industry, you won't hear any of my staff or any of my companies, we don't call it spoils, we call it dredge material.
Yes.
So the lexicon of changing the lexicon to dredge material, the environmental use, the beneficial use, that's what we do with the dredge material.
That is really interesting stuff. So dredging, it's sort of this cycle.
Yes.
Dredging is not only making these critical contributions to our economy and our security by making sure we can get to our own ports, but you're actually helping to restore the environment, which it seems like, Bill, is only going to be more relevant as we deal with climate change and extreme weather.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we see it. I mean, it's not just the Chesapeake Bay, it's the Mississippi River and your dikes and the land. There's land losses all the time down there when you have floods. All right, so land will go away. I mean, I have a saying that I like to say is, God's not making land anymore. There's only two ways you can make land: volcanoes and dredge material excavated from the ocean floor. That's the way you get it. So that land mass that we take from the ocean floor and rebuild our coasts, it's valuable. It's a valuable resource, the dredge material that is used.
That is really cool stuff. So as you look out on the horizon, where do you see the U.S. dredging industry going? What opportunities do you see? Anything you're concerned about that we need to make sure we're working on so that we have what we need in the future when we need it?
Yeah, I think with the recapitalization is a big thing. You're always going to have your maintenance dredging, okay, because your channels silt up.
Yep.
So you're always going to need to have dredging for that silt material. But I think that you're going to see a lot more in the environmental dredging. You're going to see a lot more in your coastal restoration. You're going to see a lot more in your beach nourishment. I mean, if you take a look, in the Delaware Bay, you've got Bethany Beach, you have Florida beaches, all of that dredge. Okay, so you find the borrow sites. Borrow sites are your sandbars. You take the sand, you bring it on, you put it on the beach, and it's not just for swimmers. It's not just for sunbathing. It's actual coastal protection. So when you rebuild these beaches, yes, there is the tourist part of it, but it's also the safety and security of the surrounding ocean communities. And that's, I see that expanding more and more on, rebuilding the coast, the resilience, and, dredges are going to play a major part in that.
That is really exciting stuff and seems like something that, folks would want to be part of. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the need to make sure that we've got the next generation of mariners coming along to do what needs to be done. Are you experiencing any challenges in the dredging industry? Do you have the people that you need to do this awesome work in the future?
Yeah. I think that we always are looking for mariners. And, part of my job is to, dredging's cool.
It is cool.
They're cool looking ships to get on there. So, our companies do reach out to the maritime academies. Myself, I'm a Mass Maritime Academy graduate. I sailed on vessels for 10 years. So, I have that, I can tell that story to the cadets and the folks that want to go to sea. Working with our labor unions, they all have training facilities, the MEBA, the AMO, the SIU, the MMP, all of those folks have training facilities that, you can come in as a rating and you can go all the way up through officers. So, we want to, in a big part of the American Maritime Partnership is that recruitment and getting the word out that, you can make a great living. Family sustaining wages with benefits if you come into the maritime industry. Dredging is a part of that.
Absolutely, and doing work that makes a real difference. Yes. Cool stuff. Bill, is there anything you want to put a little finer point on or anything I didn't ask you about that you were really hoping I would that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I think that, well, first of all, congratulations. You are the first female that will be the head of the American Maritime Partnership. So congratulations on that. And working with the American Maritime Partnership and the AWO, we're partners together.
Absolutely.
So look forward to continue working with you, and it's a pleasure. So thank you.
Well, it is a pleasure right back at you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and share a little bit about all the cool stuff that the U.S. dredging industry does for our economy, our security, and our environment.
Thank you.
So that is all for this episode of the American Maritime Podcast, although I'd love to keep talking with Bill. The American Maritime Podcast is powered by Big Whig Podcasts. I hope that you will share the show with friends and colleagues. I also encourage you to go to AmericanMaritimeVoices.org. Sign up to be a voice on maritime issues. We are stronger when we stand together and tell the story of our industry. Again, that is AmericanMaritimeVoices.org. Please check it out. Until next time, I'm Jennifer Carpenter, signing off.